Paul, when you were talking about um, great pieces of music hanging together, you can't just look at one note in isolation or a couple of notes in isolation and get the measure of the whole thing. Is that there's a there's a motivation and a worldview and all these other things imbued within the design, and that's what gives it the sense of whatever it is that you're listening to. There was a section within the conversation you were having with Nima Parvini, the pair of you, on Macbeth, and Nima was mentioning how there was so many cultural references and literary references being made quite implicitly within there, but specifically for the monarch for whom he'd been commissioned to write it for. And that's a great example of a work of art, which we now look at it back as a key part of the canon, indeed most of what Shakespeare wrote. And we go, God, look at that. How did he come up with that? And to know that it was, as you both mentioned, commissioned by the elite of the time, and he was just so stewed in all of this literary thought and this worldview, and it's tangentially linking it to your point about attention span. It makes me wonder what anything that we might deem great, not in comparison to the past, but great from our age, might speak to, because we talked about how it hangs together because of the religious aspect or the cultural aspect of the time. But in a recent post you wrote, Ed, on the Macbeth, it made me wonder whether we'll keep the vernacular that we've become so used to in the English language. So Macbeth gave the English language one fell swoop, the milk of human kindness. Is this a dagger which I see before me? And now the cultural milieu, elites and non-elites alike, are all on the internet, and we speak in memes, and there's wording and phraseology that we all share in the Anglosphere and beyond that. So it'll be interesting for historians of the future to look back and go, what was the thing that's making it all hang together? And I dare say they might find slightly less highbrow things sitting behind it, the frog memes and what have you.
It will seem very ephemeral, a lot of it. I suppose, the kind of cultural churn will be so quick that we won't actually know. But I mean, everything is just sort of niche based and sort of, within sort of small sort of social circles and minorities now. I'm not sure there is an overhanging culture in the same way. I mean, on the Macbeth thing, it's worth pointing out that I think the Macbeth we now know is a kind of cut down version, isn't it? Because it was performed for the king, most likely. And he wanted it short. So, I mean, that kind of...
So we're not the only ones with bad attention spans, even the great and the good.
I think a great work of art should not require you to get all the references. And then as you get into it, if you decide to spend the time examining it, layers will peel away and you'll understand more. But if it's good, you shouldn't need, I feel it's true of a poem, it's true of a piece of music and art. If you look at a piece of Caravaggio, for example, and you don't know the biblical story, I think it still hits you with a wow factor because it's really great art. And then you can choose to delve into it and understand it better. And that's something that we're doing, I hope. But it shouldn't be essential. You should be able to appreciate the piece of work for itself and not just in reference to other things, interesting though those may be. I think there's also something else which is at work, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the world of people who grew up in the 1940s or grew up in the 1970s, or the different generations. The 1940s was a very egalitarian era, but materially, particularly with planning and the war and so on. But culturally, there was a sense of hierarchy, great things to aspire to that could be opened up to everyone. And actually, that was very much the philosophy of the Soviet Union once it's gone through its proletarian culture and various other phases. And it had its various crazinesses with inventing something called formalism and then persecuting people who were supposed to be formalists. But essentially, by the end, in its last decades, it did say the great works of civilization should be the property of everybody. And what I feel we live in now is an era of extreme material inequality. and a sort of faux cultural equality, where the elites, maybe this is a bit conspiratorial, but maybe the elites as a way of holding on to their totally disproportionate and huge wealth, sort of dumb themselves down and decline. I remember when it was Gordon Brown went on was it when he went on Desert Island Disc? He was talking about the Arctic monkeys, whoever they are or were, and whether he really liked them or it was all a pose. Whereas Enoch Powell, remember Enoch Powell going on Desert Island Discs, and he chose one Beethoven, and however all the rest was all Wagner, and he spoke sort of with great enthusiasm about where we were in the ring cycle and so on. I think there's almost a sense, and as I said, maybe this is a bit conspiratorial, that in an era of extreme material inequality, the elites, I'll bounce this off our friend Matt Goodwin and see if he likes it, because the question of the elites is definitely something he's interested in, that the elites pose as culturally egalitarian.
Yeah, I think those two things are definitely linked, and I've long thought it. That is probably the sort of broadly socialist case for encouraging culture. It's a sort of, it kind of acts as a kind of secret password into higher echelons of society. And this is what it does annoy me when there is a kind of cultural cringe about, we must got to dumb things down because kids from working class backgrounds won't understand art or culture. So if they are able to even, if you're from a poor background and you get a basic grasp of some of these cultural things, it's such a door opener to life. Because lots of people who would have gone to good schools will still know a fair bit about it. Not as much as they might have, but I remember this years ago. I was speaking to one of my wife's friends who'd gone to Edinburgh University. It was quite posh, and he made it a reference to Piers Gaveston, as if, and he didn't know me, as if like anyone would know who he is. So there's not 1 in 100 people in many schools who would know who that is. But the fact that you have that kind of common historical reference is such a sort of secret door pass to elite status.
Do they not cover him in Pride Week, do you think?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure maybe, yeah, a lot. But yeah, those there is the argument that elites do kind of keep traditional classical culture to themselves as sort of as their own little thing, while pretending to sort of be down with the public. All politicians do that, don't they? They sort of pretend to sort of dumb down. It's very tiring. Remember Theodore Dalrymple said that in Who's Who, every member of the cabinet listed football as their interests, and he said he didn't know what was worse, whether like if they were pretending to, or if they actually all like football that much to. He was a tremendous cultural snob, and he is. So, but he's correct about it. I think it is important for elites to sort of lead the way on culture. And I think actually in terms of politicians, I think they'd actually get rewarded if they honestly were asked what their things, and they said, I don't actually care about whatever the Arctic monkeys. I'm actually into Wagner. I think people would actually like it.
And it does rather remind me, going back to that generation that I was talking back earlier, my father arrived in this country as a penniless refugee. And by the time I knew him, culture wasn't particularly important to him. But I do remember one of his friends saying, when we were, all penniless refugees together in Birmingham, they were living in a hostel. My father used to drag them off to see Shakespeare. They probably barely, their English was extremely rudimentary at that stage. But it was just like, that's what we should be doing. That's how we get entry into this country. That's the culture we now have to enter. And we have to go through this and figure it out and appreciate it, because that's how we join this culture, this civilization, this nation. Right. I think that's rather admirable. Sorry, Ed.
Yeah, so I've suggested before the Life in the UK test, which I've done for an article, which is all about, what percentage of people in Britain are living on benefits. All these kind of pointless questions of no interest. It should literally just be a Shakespeare quiz. Here's 100 questions about Shakespeare, and if you know enough about Shakespeare, you know enough about English civilization that you're halfway there at least.
Well, it's the Catherine Birrell-Sung model, isn't it? She is introducing this to a great many different peoples who've recently come to the island, and they all really get into it. She sees it as her duty to, in this world which has gone for the multiculturalism model, which I guess is just downstream of having lots of different people who want to champion their own culture. It's probably not a policy goal in and of itself. It's probably just an effect of that cause. But she says, look, if you want people to feel British, if you want to feel part of something, show them what it is that this country is and was built upon, and don't treat them and dumb them down. And you can make that case for actually making that point before, poorer kids from working class backgrounds. I mean, Roger Scruton was one of those people, whether you're into conservative philosophy or not. I mean, he was just a philosopher with conservative inclinations, but he got to Oxford on a scholarship, went through the grammar school system, and said, look, if that wasn't there, and indeed this is the point that Peter Hitchens makes all the time about having abolished that, is that I would never have gotten to this. I would never have been given a chance, because I would have just been, I wouldn't have been anywhere near the grammar schools because we couldn't afford to be around that area. But my working man father, who was a Labour supporter and thought all of this stuff was guff, I think Roger Scruton effectively referred to it as, is something that I found great joy in. And he ended up being one of the biggest contributors to British national life, or at least in the cultural conversation in the 20th and early 21st centuries, and indeed beyond into Europe with all of those countries that were under the Iron Curtain. He helped get some of this stuff we've been talking about today, the Western canon, through the back door of these, authoritarian dictatorships. So there's a lot that hangs on this kind of stuff, and I know we've talked a lot about our own personal relationship with it and worries about it, but actually there's a whole lot of stuff around human self-realization going on here too, and getting to the depths of humanity.